So I'm moving house and I'm going to walk you through dismantling my professional smart home. And what I mean by professional smart home is it's not a load of off-the-shelf IoT rubbish that anyone can install. The system I have in my home is by Loxone, which is a company that I used to work for back in the day. And this is a PLC-based home automation system, but because it's PLC-based, it can also be used for things like commercial BMS, industrial controls and any other custom application. And in this video I'm going to walk you through the stages of swapping my smart home back to a regular home. And along the way I'm going to explain what I've done, how I've done it, and the things that I've learned along the way. So if you're doing something similar, you can learn from my mistakes and the things that I've done. And this is going to be a series of videos detailing each smart subsystem. So things like the lighting, as you can see here, the his and her mood, smart heating, smart security, and smart audio, visual, and networking. So I'm going to run through what makes up this smart heating control system. I'm going to explain how and why it works in terms of the hardware. I'm going to explain how and why it works in terms of the software, the programming side, and the app user interface side. And you're going to follow along as I retrofit it backwards to being a regular home that it was when we first moved here. So in terms of the existing hardware, we've got a switch in every room, and this does multiple things. But in terms of the heating, we've got a temperature sensor in each switch in every room. So that acts as almost a thermostat for each room. We've got a valve actuator in every room, and this modulates based on the demand in that room. So it can either open a little bit or it can open a lot and vary the flow into the radiator. So we've got those in every room. So that's the individual rooms covered. Now this was where the thermostat was. This is in the lounge, and this has just been blanked off, as you can see, and nothing's really happening there. And here where the boiler is, which is where the original programmer was, so you can see that's been blanked off. But behind there is what's called a nano IO, which is basically a wireless relay, which is switching the boiler here and the hot water on. So that's what makes up the smart heating control system at the moment. Now I'm just going to quickly run through how it all pieces together and works. So first of all, what we've got is we've basically got schedules for each room because we've got hardware that can control that on a room-to-room basis. So firstly, we set our schedule, and it's pretty standard as you'd see in any other sort of normal home. So this is our schedule for the kitchen, Monday through to Sunday. And then what we do is we set our comfort temperature. So when we're in the green, that's our comfort temperature, which is set to 20 degrees. So then what happens when we're within our green schedule to bring on the comfort temperature of 20 degrees, we go to our switch, and that then senses the temperature in the kitchen. And then if it's under 20 degrees, our valve actuator will open. And then what will happen? Our boiler relay will switch on and switch on the boiler. And then if there's a big discrepancy between the target temperature of 20 degrees and the temperature that we're actually reading, let's say it was 10 degrees, then what would happen is this would open fully and let as much heat flow through as possible to heat the room up quickly. And then as it's getting closer to that target temperature of 20 degrees, it obviously senses it here. That closes a little bit until it's completely shut and we've reached temperature. And then we can shut off the boiler. And before we go any further on the heating, the central heating system, just want to point out the hot water is pretty standard. We've just got a normal schedule for each day. And when we're in the green zone, what will happen is the second relay in here will just trigger for the hot water to come on and heat up the hot water tank. So that's very simple, straightforward. And when the tank's at temperature, it just automatically switches off. And then the other thing I want to show you is the IR heater control in the workshop. So nothing fancy. All I've got is, we got a smart socket here, which is on all the time. And then it's just a simple case of off, on. Very simple. So I'll just run you through the software programming side very quickly. So as you can see, in my home, I've got 3 mini servers, which are the main controllers. I've got the main one, which is up in the loft. I've got a wireless mini server, which is down in the lounge. And then I've also got another wired slave mini server in the workshop. So I'll connect into my gateway mini server. So here we are in the kitchen, and this is the block, if you like, the controls within Loxone config, the intelligent room controller that controls the heating on a room to room basis. So I'm just going to put this into live view with manual value adjustment. That allows me to make adjustments working just in the software, so I can kind of mimic things that are happening out in the field, like touching switches or temperatures changing, that kind of thing. So I'm just going to go through the basics here. So what we've got is we've got this T, which is the temperature from that switch that we were looking at. And you can see that it's reading 23.3 degrees at the moment. So even if there was a demand on the schedule for this room to be heating up, that 20 degrees comfort temperature, we're currently over that. So it wouldn't kick in the boiler and it wouldn't open the valve. So as you can see over here, we're at 0. And this is on a scale of 0 to 10. 10 being fully open, 5 being 50%, and 0 being closed. So that's why you can see this valve that we looked at on the radiator being completely closed. Now, the next thing that I haven't mentioned yet, if you look at this back door, left window, top window, I've actually got window and door contacts on the window and doors. So if those are open for more than 3 to 5 minutes, can't remember what I've got it set to, if they're open and the room's heating up, we want that to automatically switch off the heating in that room. There's no point heating the room if we've got windows and doors open. So if we have a look in the app, let's have a look at the kitchen, and this is the same as what you'd see on your mobile phone or tablet. So at the moment you can just see it's in its normal state. But if I go back into the programming software and mimic me opening the back door, so back door is now open, and you won't see anything happen immediately because we've got that delay of 3 to 5 minutes. So I've just had a look and I've clicked on the intelligent room controller. It brings up the parameters over here, and this parameter DWWC is the delay for the windows and doors, which I've got it set to 150 seconds at the moment. So we need to wait 150 seconds and then you'll see what will happen. In the meantime though, when we're waiting for that, it's actually 2.5 minutes. What we can look at is if we go to categories, window, and we can see here that where we've mimicked it in the software, it's actually appearing within the user interface. Here you see kitchen back door is open. So let's go back to the kitchen now and see if that's been 2 minutes yet. Not yet. There we go. So you saw it just changed, and you can see this sort of brown color here. If we go in here, it goes into off. That brown color indicates off. So this room now, if it was on, if it was heating, would now not be. Close the door. So we've mimicked or simulated closing the door, and we can see straight away it just goes back to its normal mode immediately. And then the other two things just to quickly point out is the ceiling motion sensor. So what that does is it extends the heating schedule. So let's say I think you saw it a minute ago actually, because we'd been moving around in the kitchen. The schedule finished here, but because we were still moving around in the kitchen, there was presence in that room, it just automatically extends that schedule for 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever you set it to. So that's what the motion sensor does. And then this good night mode. So when we go to bed, we triple tap a switch and that puts the house into night mode. And in every room, if we did have that schedule automatically extended through motion, by triple tapping that we're going to bed, we want everything to go into night mode, that then stops or cancels that extended heating schedule. That's what we've got it programmed to do anyway. You can program it to do whatever you like. Now, can I just ask a quick favor of you? If you're enjoying this and you're taking value from it, can you just click that like button? I'd really appreciate it. So this first step, and I'm doing this in every room, first step is to remove the Loxone valve. So press this green button. That unclips it using these little, whatever they're called, that clip around this grey base. So that's unclipped. Now we just want to unscrew this. Okay, and that can actually just screw or clip straight back in there. Actually, let me show you. If you can see that little plunger, that's what goes in and out, adjusting how open or closed this valve is. So either lets nothing through the radiator in this state, or when it's fully down, it's fully open. So lets full flow through the radiator. And then very straightforward. Put the old thermostatic valve back on, set that to 3. Decided I'm going to take the batteries out because what can happen is when they're searching for their mini server or communication base, it can actually drain the batteries because they're constantly looking for their communication path. So I'll remove those, and then I'm going to put the cover back on here. So that's the constant supply, constant 24 volt supply if you want to power them in that way. Put that back, put the batteries in, and then I'll just label that spare room. So yeah, pretty straightforward. So I've done that for all the rooms. And now the slightly trickier part is moving on to the thermostat and the programmer for the boiler and the hot water. So let's get into that now. Okay, so the next thing we're doing is we're putting the old programmer back. So behind here, I'll show you in a second, we've got a Nano IO, which is a relay that basically acts similar to this and switches on the boiler or switches on a pump or however your heating system works. Typically, in most, it will be a signal for the hot water, a signal for the central heating. So let's have a look at what's in there now. Okay, so let's switch the fuses off and let's have a look what's behind here. So this is the Nano IO, and this has two, well, this is a wireless relay basically, and this communicates wirelessly back to the main controller. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to disconnect that. I'm going to work out what all the cables are doing, label them, and then I'll show you switching it over to this and the controls behind it as well. I've done a little drawing to detail it out. So bear with me one sec. Right, so because I'm an absolute professional when it comes to videography, I forgot to switch on the audio at this stage. But yeah, just to give you a quick overview, this is the Nano IO, and I don't know whether to play it here or just have it still image. Yeah, that's better. Right, so what we got here is we got our supply going in the middle, so our live constant supply 230 volt AC and our neutral, and then we got our switch live Q1 and our other switch live Q2. So one relay is switching the hot water on and the other relay is switching the central heating on. And I've done the same for this section too. So this is the wiring center, and I haven't done anything to this wiring center. I've just left it as is. So basically all I'm doing here is I'm swapping the programmer out for that Loxone Nano IO. That's it. Everything else I haven't touched. So yeah, the wiring center is already configured and wired in a way to sequence the valves, the pumps, switching on of the boiler correctly already, so I haven't touched that, I haven't needed to. Okay, so that is the Nano now removed. So left cable was controlling the hot water, right cable central heating. So now what we've got is we just got the standard cables that were there originally. So I've labelled central heating and hot water because I don't trust myself, got a memory like a goldfish, so don't want to potentially cause myself issues down the line, so made sure I've labelled those. So now what I'm going to do is connect it back to the original programmer, and then once I've done that, I'm going to talk you through the controls of it, and I've got a nice little drawing to go through with you. Just a quick one, guys. If you're looking for free training courses in smart home automation, commercial BMS and industrial controls, click the link below and we'll sort you out with some free training. Okay, so onto the programmer, guys. And you can see these are the pins on the back and they correlate. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but there's a little diagram there. So let's move that to one side. And this is the diagram. So I've drawn this diagram out, and I'll talk you through it. The diagram that's on the back. So what we got is we got a 230 volt supply That's just pretty standard. And then what you can see is this live 230 volt supply is getting distributed across 2 relays. And then we've got those 4 remaining pins going out. Now pin 1 and pin 2 we don't want to use, because in its normal state, i.e. everything's off, the system's off, you can see that that's closed, that relay is closed. If we connected the heating there, things would operate the opposite way round. So when we wanted the heating, or sorry, hot water off, it would actually be on, because that would be closed. And the same thing with the central heating. When we want that off, it would actually be on, because that's closed here. So the 2 pins that we do want to use are pin 3 and pin 4. So when the programmer is configured and the times are set to bring on hot water, this contact will then switch from here to here, sending that 230 volts off to the hot water, and we'll go into what goes on after this bit in a second. And then it's exactly the same for the central heating. So the programmer's configured, set up with the timings and stuff. We want our central heating to switch on. So we've got our 230 volts coming down here. Not only is it going to the common on this relay, but it's also going to the common on this relay. And then because that's now activated, this relay for the central heating, that moves from this position, this contact moves from this position, the normally closed position, to the normally open position. And then we're taking, and then that flows, that 230 volts goes off here on pin 4. And then it's a similar thing happening on both the hot water circuit and the central heating circuit. So that then goes off, and that will go firstly through the cylinder stat. And we're set the dial on the cylinder stat to be around 60, 65 degrees. So this contact on the cylinder stat will be closed if the cylinder is under 60 or 65 degrees, depending on what we've got it set. If it's under that, then that 230 volts can come in here, through there, and then goes off to the wiring center, and then does whatever the wiring center's configured to do based on what hot water system you've got. So it might open the valve, then switch on a pump, then switch on the boiler. If the tank is over 60 to 65 degrees, then that will open, so open circuit. We'll still have 230 volts. Let's pretend 230 volts here. It's just waiting then for that stat to close again when the tank is then under 60 or 65 degrees. And then it can heat up the hot water tank again by opening the valve, turning on the pump and switching on the boiler. Now it's exactly the same principles on the central heating. So we got our 230 volts coming off from the programmer to here through the room stat, depending on where you've got that. So in my house, it's the living room. A lot of houses, it's the hallway. And then similar to what we did on the cylinder stat, we set that to whatever we want. So between 18 and 21 degrees. So if that room is less than 18 or 21 degrees, that's closed, which allows that 230 volts, let's say, to go off and do exactly the same thing. Switch on the valve, open the valve, switch on the pump, switch on the boiler. If it's over that temperature, meaning we don't have to heat up the house or the room or whatever, then that's open. So again, we still got the 230 volts here. Let's say, I know it's not actually there because it's not creating a return path, but let's say it is, it's waiting there until that then drops below 18 to 21 degrees, closes again, and then sends that 230 volts off to the valve, the pump, and the boiler. So yeah, that's what those pins are doing on the programmer. And then I've wired the right pins on the frame of the programmer, neutral, live, and then we got the hot water and we got the central heating. So it's now just a matter of mounting that on, connecting it, and then we can move on to the next bit. So that's the programmer done and sorted. Obviously, we've not switched power on yet, but that's all ready to go. So now, just to talk you through the thermostat before I go and do it. So it's pretty straightforward. I'm not even going to explain the pins because it's very straightforward. We got a neutral and a live on the pins here. But yeah, basically what I have been doing with the Loxone system, where the thermostat is, I've literally just been bypassing the switch built in here, or the contact in here. I've been bypassing that and just got a straight cable going off to the wiring center. And the reason is because with Loxone, we're looking at all the rooms collectively and then assessing if there's enough rooms requiring heat depending on how we set things up. We'll then switch the valve, pump, boiler, or at least send the signal from that wireless relay to then switch on ultimately the boiler. That's not decided by the thermostat on the wall. So ultimately we're bypassing the thermostat and we're just using our Loxone control relay to do all of this. So hence why this was bypassed. So this is where the thermostat was. So yeah, it's going to be pretty straightforward. I'm going to take that off. I'm going to connect that in between those two cables, which I've currently shorted out, and that's it really. Yeah, this is pretty much it, guys. So as you can see, we've got the supply coming from the boiler, or the programmer, and then the signal, once this is under temperature, so say it's under 20 degrees, that's closed, which then sends the signal off to the wiring center. And I've just shorted that out using a Wago. Now, I just wanted to make sure which cable, the yellow or red, was the live or the cool. It doesn't really matter, but I just wanted to be sure. So what I've done is I've set the programmer to be on heating constantly. And what I've done is I've got my tester here. So I know that that's the live and that one's the switch live or cool going off to the wiring center. So I know that one has to go into my live terminal. Okay, so that is the thermostat on the wall. So now I want to test it. So what I've done is I've set the programmer into constantly on, or heating constantly on. So that's the relay closed there, sending the signal to here. Now this is set to, not sure if you can see, 10 degrees. So of course the room is over 10 degrees. That's now open. So if I switch that now to 30 degrees, what you'd expect to see is the heating system to kick in. Now for my heating system, the way it's configured is that should just bring on a pump. So let's do that now. I heard that click and I can hear a pump going. So yeah, this pump is now running. That's for the heating, and my system is a bit different from conventional systems. This tank is acting more as a thermal store. So the boiler only triggers and switches on when this thermal store is under temperature. So that's the central heating working okay. Now let's test the hot water. So for now, I'm just going to switch that heating to always off. I'll set it up later. Okay, so that's now off. Now let's do the same thing with the hot water. So hot water, actually we can just boost the hot water. Hot water boost, 1 hour. Cool, and the boiler's fired up. So hot water also working.